All right, we're a couple minutes past the hour, so I think we can get started. Before I get into the content, if you have any questions, you can leave them in the chat, and I'll be trying to pay attention to the chat and look at it every now and again. And I'm pretty sure that we're going to have time for questions at the end as well. When you are sending a question or anything in the chat, there's an option to either send it to the hosts or send it to everybody. So if you want your question to be visible to everybody, just remember to switch it. And I'll be repeating the questions for the people who are watching this recording in the future. If I don't repeat a question, then let me know in the chat and to make sure that I do repeat the question. Okay, yeah, so this presentation is going to be about making better software estimates. And let's just dive right into it. So I'm Alex Evans. I'm a senior software engineer here at Integral. And I'll go over what we're going to talk about. So this isn't going to be just about tips on making better estimates, techniques, and that sort of thing. We're going to talk about how we might be able to plan better so that estimates are easier. We're going to talk about how we communicate about estimates as well, estimating as a team. So we're going to cover a lot of stuff all about estimates. And yeah, the first thing that I have is, why is estimating hard? If estimating wasn't hard, then we probably wouldn't be here. We wouldn't have to have a presentation on how to make estimates better. So there's several things I'll go through to kind of share why estimating can be hard. And the first thing is technologies. So a system or an engagement, a system, a product that you're making, there is an incredibly large set of technologies that you could use to make that system. Different combinations of programming languages, different libraries and frameworks, different integrations you could do. There's just a huge set of technologies out there. And on top of that, those technologies are always changing too. So you're constantly having to learn new technologies. And how this relates to estimates is it's not really realistic to expect a developer to be familiar with every single technology that's out there. And most of the time, even on your own team or when you're working on a product, you're not going to be familiar, the developer, a single developer is probably not going to be familiar with every single technology that that product uses, especially for larger ones. So all that can create unknowns for the developer, And like I said, things are changing too, so that can create unknowns, and that can just make estimating harder on the developer. So to help with that, I'll say to help with that, we'll go over this stuff a little bit more in the future too, later in the presentation. But use technologies that you're familiar with, and established tech stacks, technologies that can handle the production environment that you are trying to go to. And to have a team with developers that have a diverse set of skills. So if you don't know how a certain technology works, or maybe you have a general understanding of it, you can lean on another developer that has a deeper understanding of how that technology works. You can lean on each other to figure out, how hard is something going to be, and to estimate better as a team. Next thing, integrations. So integrating two systems together. I think a lot of the time, if a software developer or software developer team is being brought in to do something, in this case, to make an integration, that integration probably doesn't exist. Or at least we weren't able to find that integration. So you're probably doing something, you're making an integration that hasn't been done before. You're blazing a new trail. And of course, that can make estimating harder because it's something that hasn't been done before. And just in general with integrations, there are small details when you're integrating two systems that can be easy to miss. There might be a variable that you thought was public, but was actually private or protected that you needed so that you could extend the other system. It could be that the API for the other system is just slightly different than what you need. And you're also working with a third party. It can depend how long the support that the that the third party has for this integration. They might not be that good. They might not support extensions very well. They might not extend the solution the way that you want them to. So whenever you're dealing with a third party, it can make estimating a little bit harder because these things just increase unknowns and can raise risks. So then the next thing is just different experiences and skill sets. So each developer on a team, they can implement a feature in a different way. I find that the way that each developer writes code is slightly unique. You might have two developers that have similar skills and experience levels and know similar technologies, and they might write a feature in a similar way, but most of the time it's going to be slightly different. And I've been in cases where a developer would write a feature or update a feature in one way, and another developer might write or update it in another way. And both ways are completely valid, but they're also completely different. So this means a developer has to constantly go over the code in the code base over and over again to keep up to date. And of course, this can mean that when a software engineer is estimating something, maybe there's something that they missed. Maybe there's some update that just happened that would influence the estimate they make. So, and two, developers that have different skill levels and experiences, they're probably going to estimate a task differently, depending on how comfortable they are with whatever they're estimating. Then another thing, requirements. So how can requirements make estimating a little bit harder? Well, it depends on the requirements. Sometimes requirements can make estimating a lot easier because they have really clear acceptance criteria. But other times, maybe especially at the beginning of the project, the requirements might be a bit vague, or the project might not be fully scoped. And maybe the requirements are changing a lot. So with that kind of uncertainty, of course, it can make estimating a bit harder. So each of these things that I just talked about, differing technologies and the integrations, developer skill sets and requirements, they all combine to pretty much make each project unique. I found that every project that I've been on, it hasn't really been like the last. There's always been differences. And like I mentioned before, oftentimes when a software developer or software developer team is being brought in to do something, you're dealing with something that doesn't have an automated way to do it. You're dealing with something that doesn't exist yet. As a software developer, I've found that if there's something that I'm doing the exact same way over and over again, I'm going to automate it. And just for the solutions that are out there, if there's something that lots of people have had to do over and over again, there's probably an automated way to do it. So the work that is left for us to do is a lot of the times the work that isn't very repeatable, the work that for a solution that hasn't been made yet. So of course, if it hasn't been made yet, and if it's not very repeatable, that can make the type of work that we do harder to estimate. All right, and I'll pause here and look at the chat. All right, don't see any questions yet. Again, leave questions in the chat and I'll look at them periodically. So next section, this is a pretty quick section, but are estimates even accurate? How accurate are they? When are they accurate? And again, if estimates were always completely accurate and we were they were always really, really good, then we probably wouldn't be wondering, how can we be better? So I did a bit of research on this and I found this report called the Chaos Report. It's from the Standish Group. And in this report, they gathered statistics on software projects, on if they were successful or not, and a bunch of things about each of those software projects. How big were the team sizes? What types of methodologies did the teams do? If you haven't heard of that report, I would recommend taking a look at it. It's free. But the thing I'm going to focus on here is from 2011 to 2015, they found that about 30% of projects were considered successful. And the rest, the majority of them, were considered either to be outright failures or challenged. So a project would be challenged if it wasn't on budget or on time, or it just didn't meet the customer's satisfaction. So a project not being on budget or on time, that probably means the estimate, there were some estimates that were wrong in those projects. So estimates can often be not accurate. And from the other research I've done, yeah, people can struggle with estimates. So they can often be not accurate, but that's why we're here. That's why we're having this talk. How can we make our estimates better so that we don't fall into the 71% of projects here. So next section, these are going to be a bunch of things about making better estimates, which I think are important, but also, like I mentioned, we're going to get to planning and communicating about estimates, which the communicating about estimates, that's really important too. And yeah, I'm excited to get to that part too. So for making better estimates, the first little piece of advice I have is to keep in mind that similar work might not always scale linearly. So let's say we have two systems maybe of equal complexity, and you need to make an integration between those two systems. And let's say you estimate that integration to be 1 story point. Okay, so you do the integration that you estimated at 1 story point. Now let's say there's a new system that you need to integrate with. You need to integrate system A and system B to this new system C. And you might think, well, it's just 2 more integrations. Let's say the systems are all about as complex as each other, they're of equal complexity again. So you might estimate, yeah, each of these integrations is going to be a 1. So the work to do both these integrations is in total going to be a 2. That could be the case. And that's great if that's the case. It means maybe your system is built in a really extensible and scalable way. But just something to keep in mind is that now you have a whole nother system, and the overall complexity of your entire solution has increased. So depending on that complexity, it might not scale linearly. It's like an analogy to this that I heard a few months ago is if you're running 10 miles, the first mile is going to be easier than the 10th mile, even though you're doing the same thing, you're just running. Right. So that's the first tip. Next thing, this might sound kind of obvious, is to just take more time. In the communication section of this presentation, we'll be talking about how you can communicate that you need more time. But for this, yeah, if you are uncomfortable with making an estimate, like you have no idea, or you think your estimate's going to be wrong, you have a low confidence with it, ask if you can have more time, to do research or to do a spike, to reach out to other people to see what their opinions are, right? There's nothing wrong with not being sure about an estimate. You shouldn't feel bad if you don't know the answer right away and you feel like you need time to find that answer. Next thing, this is just to remember, what does an estimate include? So when you're estimating something, is that just the coding that goes with it? Or is it also the code reviews? Should you include the time that takes in the estimate? Should you deploy, or should you include the deployment? Should you include other things? So it's important that everybody just knows what's included in your estimates, that everybody's on the same page. Right, smaller tasks. So this is a big one. Smaller tasks are just easier to estimate. Around maybe a 1 or 3 story point, maybe taking a day, less than a week, that sort of thing. Because the larger a story is, the larger a story, a feature, whatever it is, the more you have to hold in your head, the more you have to consider. And the estimates are probably just going to be less precise if you have a larger story point. Then maybe if you broke it up, those estimates might be more accurate. On top of that, if the estimate happens to be wrong, then you'll know about it sooner. You'll know about it sooner, and you can pivot sooner. So people know about it sooner. You can pivot sooner, and you can react faster if the story is smaller. The next, this is one directly from me, not from any source, but This is one I kind of picked up on. So learn the business. Now, I am guilty of this. I've done this in the past, but developers really might just want to focus on the technical aspects of a project. They might not care too much about the business itself. But I'm going to encourage you to learn about the business itself too, not just the technical aspects, but also how does the business make money and what are they trying to solve and what's the business flow. Learning these things, learning about how the business operates, this is going to help you estimate better. You're going to have more context around what you're estimating. So of course, with more context, your estimates are going to be better. If there's scope that you feel that needs to be negotiated, you are going to better be able to negotiate about that scope because you're going to know more about what the priorities of the business are, what they find most important and what they don't. And then while you're negotiating the scope, you can explain what you think is valuable, and you can think about the solution that you're making in terms of what the business finds valuable. And then you can pick technologies and solutions that are going to match the business better than maybe other technologies wouldn't. All right, next thing, just consider if the estimate is right for you. Estimates, they aren't always transferable between different developers. If you feel an estimate isn't right for you, then speak up and the team can re-estimate it. So maybe something was estimated a long time ago and that estimate has expired, so you need a new one. Or maybe maybe you're thinking of something, some unknown or some risk that whoever estimated it before didn't think of. So yeah, just keep in mind, it's okay to re-estimate something if and it's okay to ask the team, can we re-estimate this if you feel like it should be. So then I think this is the last tip. So use prior experience. We talked about work might not scale linearly, to keep that in mind, but you should use prior experience if you've worked on a story that's very similar to the one that you're going to be working on now. Yeah, think about how that went. Was there something that came up that just blew up and made the estimate take a lot longer than you thought, or did it go fine? But keep in mind, really think about what are the differences between what I'm doing now and what I did before, because just a few small little differences can make a really big impact on the estimate. Oh, nope, I was wrong. We still have more. So yeah, we'll keep going, more tips on how to estimate. So this is something including complexity and confidence. If you're estimating in hours or days, something that's more time-based than story points, we'll talk about story points later, but yeah, if you're using a time-based estimate, it might be worth it to include a number or a rating for how complex and confident you are along with that time estimate. So it can be really useful to say, say you estimate that this thing is going to take a week, but you're only 50% confident that you're right about that. That can be really useful to know. Then next thing, too, along the same lines, you can give a range if you feel like that is going to be more helpful for whoever is taking your estimate and planning. If a range is better, then yeah, go with the range. So story points versus hours. Next thing, I recommend for better estimates to use story points, but I know there's a debate. There's a debate out there. Should we just estimate in hours, or should we estimate in story points? Or story points even worth it? Do they do anything? I'm going to explain why I think we should still use story points. So from my research and kind of from my own personal experience, I found that estimating in hours can be unreliable. Humans in general, not just for software, but for for really everything, estimating in hours, we can be pretty unreliable about that. We can be pretty bad about estimating, say, this is going to take 8 hours when it ended up taking 2 days, and so on. So humans aren't generally not good at nailing down exactly how long something is going to take. But we can maybe try to make estimates based on something that humans are just naturally better at. And humans are better at relative sizing. So we can get a sense of, well, this thing is bigger than this thing or smaller than this thing. we can kind of get a sense of how things relate to each other. So this story is bigger than this one, or smaller than this one, or more complex. So that's kind of what story points are based off of. Story points are based on relative sizing. A 3 or a 1 for one team isn't going to be the same as a 3 or a 1 on another team. And that is taken, and that's fine. It's all relative. And it plays on our strength of being able to do relative sizing better than nailing down exactly how long something is going to take. So that is kind of that's the main reason why I like story points better. I know that can kind of sound fuzzy. It sounds like story points can kind of be fuzzy when you try to convert them to time. But yeah, I think since our work is more knowledge work, and there's all these unknowns, and there's all these things that can pop up. Yeah, having a more fuzzy estimate can be better. But we do need to eventually convert. We need some way to convert story points to a time frame, because that's oftentimes the main reason why we're estimating something. So we're estimating how much work can we fit into a sprint, or how long is this project going to take. So I'll say story points are correlated with time, but I don't think we should directly convert them to hours. We shouldn't have a direct conversion. We should keep in mind that there's a range of time that something can generally take when we're trying to convert from story points to figure out how long something is going to take. All right, so now we're on to the next section, planning for estimates. And don't see any questions in the chat yet. So yeah, this section is going to be when we're planning a project, how can we make estimates easier? So the first thing is reducing the scope of the project. Going back to that chaos report that I mentioned earlier, one of the key indicators that they found that indicated if a project would be successful or not is the scope of the project. So they found that a project that was 6 months or less, scoped to be 6 months or less, had a higher chance of succeeding than larger projects. And when teams would say, if you have a larger project, a larger engagement or product that you need to make, if they would break it up into smaller segments where you would just estimate the first segment, and then once that's done, you'd estimate the next segment of the work. If you broke it up like that, then the estimates would be better. So yeah, reducing the scope. In addition, this means that the work that you're actually estimating is nearer to the present. It's not very far out. So that's going to make estimates better, because if you're trying to estimate something that's far into the future, the estimate is probably going to be more unreliable. Estimating far into the future can be hard, because as you go on, you're going to keep learning more and more. And by the time you get to that work, the estimate is probably going to be stale. All right. So then the next thing, when you're planning a project, you have to pick what technologies you're going to use. And I touched on this earlier, but using familiar technologies to your team and proven technologies can help reduce risk. And yeah, help reduce risk. And it means that your team can ramp up faster. But of course, we need a way to learn new technologies. We can't just always pick something that we're comfortable with, especially since technology is always changing. We should always be learning new things. So it's important to have a separate way of learning new things. So a separate professional development time, like Integral has, could be really helpful. And then also having a more diverse team. So a team made up of developers where the different developers are familiar with different technologies and they can lean on each other. So if I'm not familiar with a certain technology that the project is using, but some other developer is, then I can learn from that developer, and I can continue learning new things on a project while still keeping the risk to the project lower. All right. Next thing, story sizes. So when we're planning, say, a sprint or something, we should maybe try to keep the stories along similar sizes. So try to keep everything, say, around a 1 or around a 3. And this is just going to make it easier to estimate, because like I mentioned, story points are kind of relative. So the team has to learn, well, what is a 3 really, or what is a 1 really, and how does something go from a 1 to a 3 to a 5 to an 8? And the more when stories are around the same size, you just kind of have to keep in mind, well, this what is a 3? If everything's around a 3, then you don't have to worry about what's an 8 as opposed to everything else. You don't have to worry, does the entire team have the same concept of an 8? If everything's around the same size, you just have to keep in mind what a 3 or a 1 is, as opposed to all these different numbers. And on top of that, it can make it easier to compare along the same lines. And then it can make predicting easier. I read about Monte Carlo forecasting, which is something you can use to predict how long something is going to take, or predict how a project is going to go. And that generally works better if you have stories, if you have segments of work that are around the same size. Okay. Then the next thing, of course, when you're planning to track sprint velocity, you can, after you have a few sprints, the history of a few sprints, you can get an idea, well, do we constantly underestimate or do we constantly overestimate? And is it consistent? Are we consistently overestimating? Because if it's consistent, then you can factor that into the future. So it's important to have that kind of history to know how good your estimates are, and if you're improving your estimates, and how reliable you can forecast into the future. All right, touched on this earlier, but estimates can expire quickly. The longer an estimate sits, the less accurate it's probably going to be, because as we keep going through a project, we're going to learn more and more and more. So keep in mind, try not to leave an estimate sit for a while. If you feel that an estimate should change, then change it. All right, so that was all about planning. I'll look at the chat, see a question. So I'll read the question out loud. What are your thoughts on teams that track remaining hours for tasks and use an hour burn down chart? Yeah. So, well, it's a lot of slides back, but touched on this a little bit. If you're going to be estimating in hours, then I'd recommend maybe also include a number or a rating for complexity or confidence that you have. So you can say, I estimate this is going to take 8 hours and I'm 80% confident that it's going to take 8 hours. Or maybe you're just 50% confident. Just having more metrics can help. And then two, I do recommend story points, estimating story points more than hours, just because estimating exactly how long something is going to take is harder, in my opinion, than relatively sizing things. But yeah, so those are a few things that I would say. All right, so actually, yeah, next we're going to talk about communicating about estimates. So yeah, we talked about, well, how can we make estimates themselves better, and how can we plan for better estimates? But this is going to be, does everybody have the same idea of what an estimate is? Does everybody have the same notion of, of who gets to estimate, who gets to say? So we're gonna talk about how we communicate about estimates, because that's probably almost as important as the estimates themselves. Especially because if estimates break down, or if the way that we talk about estimates breaks down, if people have different ideas about what estimates are, that can create a bad working environment. That can create an environment where people don't trust each other, where there's fear that you're going to make a wrong estimate and you're going to be punished for that, or blame too. So it's important that everybody's on the same page as to what the pros and cons of estimates are, so that we can talk about them better. So the first thing is just estimates are estimates. Estimates are us trying to predict the future. So of course, if you're trying to predict the future, there's always going to be some uncertainty there. And essentially you're making an educated guess on how long something is going to take. So with that in mind, if these are predictions of the future, we probably shouldn't try to directly convert them to a deadline or a commitment. Now, we definitely need to use them to influence deadlines and commitments or budgets, and I'll talk about that. But a direct conversion, yeah, that might not be good. It might put a lot of pressure on somebody to try to get an estimate as right as they can when it might not be realistic if there's a lot of risks or unknowns for that project. So yeah, another thing too is estimates, they change over time. Like I've kept saying, as we learn more, our estimates are going to change. So having a more flexible having more flexible deadlines, more flexible commitments can really help with that, because if you're more flexible with that, you can take you can keep in mind, estimates can fluctuate, estimates can change, and if you can keep your deadlines flexible as things change, then that's going to help a lot. And that's going to take pressure off of the people who are doing the estimates. And yeah, and we're going to be able to pivot and change. So talked about estimates expiring, estimates not being precise, especially the further out we go, and just estimates, you should be prepared for an unreliable estimate to happen, because they happen. Bad estimates are just going to happen, and that is something that we should keep in mind. So estimates are estimates, guesses about the future, educated guesses about the future. The next thing is those doing the work should be the ones who are estimating the work. So this means the developers or the engineers on the team, they should be the ones who are estimating the work. So you shouldn't have, say, somebody from sales or somebody from leadership making an estimate on how long something is going to take. It should really be the people who are going to actually build the product. So I've heard of stories. I've never been in this situation this situation myself, but I've heard of stories where a salesperson might talk to a client and estimate how long something is going to take, and then the development team is held to that estimate, and they didn't get a say in how long something would take, and it turns out that estimate is very wrong. So you can imagine how this can create an environment where people are stressed out, where people blame each other, where people don't trust each other. All right, next thing so this is going to be how to deal with uncomfortable estimates, how you can communicate to somebody that you're uncomfortable making an estimate about something, or you need more time, or you need more resources to be able to estimate something better for you. So this isn't just for like tips for a developer to communicate more clearly about these kinds of estimates, but this is also kind of for the people who aren't making estimates. This may give you a window into how a developer might feel in these sorts of situations. So you may have heard phrases like what I have on the slide here. So, hey, I just need a quick estimate. Just throw a number out there for me. And this might make you feel uncomfortable, because just a quick estimate you feel might just be wrong, and it's probably you don't have high confidence in it, and it's probably going to be wrong. So in this situation, you might feel like, well, I don't want to give you an estimate right now. I would like to take some time to see if I can make a better estimate. So how you can explain that, how you can maybe push back against this, and try to communicate why it's important for you to try to not make a hasty, quick estimate. So you can say, I want the project to succeed. You can start with the project. So I want the project to succeed. And if I give bad estimates, that's going to impact the project success. And so since I want the project to succeed, I want to really take my time and get this estimate right for you. Okay. Same thing with the client. You can, along the same lines, you can say, I want the client to succeed. I don't want to put them at jeopardy. So let me get back to you in a couple of hours, something like that. And then If those two things don't work, then you can appeal to the person's self-interest. So you can say, I feel like if I give you this estimate now, it's probably not going to be very accurate. And if I could just take a little bit of time to make this estimate better, then it's going to be easier on you. Because if I give you a bad estimate, it's going to make you look bad, and I don't want that. I want you to succeed. So appealing to the person's self-interest, appealing to themselves, that can help too. Of course, you should keep in mind, like, if this is a person you don't feel comfortable pushing back on, then you can talk to your manager about this, and they can help you communicate this. So just keep in mind, how comfortable are you pushing back on this? How blunt or how frank you can be with this person. So then this is also, then this slide is about how you can communicate if you feel like your estimates are not being accounted for, if you feel like the risks you're bringing up, they are constantly really not being considered, if you feel ignored. So again, you'd bring this up with somebody that you trust, that you feel like you can talk openly with. So this isn't just for estimates either, how you communicate about how you feel about your estimates. This could be about anything you feel like you're being ignored about, or your opinion is not being heard about. You can appeal to your working relationship with this person, or with whoever. You can say, well, look, this has happened over and over again, and I feel like I'm not being valued. I feel like my opinion is not being valued. This is putting a strain on me. This is putting a strain on my trust and general goodwill. So you can say something like that. You can appeal to them and try to tell them how this makes you feel. All right. With that all being said, we talked about pushing back against giving hasty estimates or estimates that you might not feel comfortable with. But you also don't want to just say, no, I'm not going to give you an estimate. You want to work with the other person. You want to offer compromises, and you want to be able to help that other person so that they can do their job. So, don't just say no. Work with that other person to offer compromises. So the way you can communicate this is to say, hey, I need time to do research, or I need time to do a spike on this, or hey, if I could talk to an expert on this, if I could talk to this person and get back to you. And then two, discuss scope. We talked about negotiating scope. So maybe there's something that you can move out of scope for later that will give you time to figure out how long that's going to take. Okay. So then the next thing, this is about how we talk about, like, how we communicate why would estimates be padded, or why would we get buffer time, that sort of thing. So padding estimates can be useful. There are times when you might want to do it or might not want to do it. If you're on a team where things constantly pop up that are high priority, or you're constantly firefighting, things that are outside of the sprint pop up like that, then yeah, maybe you want a buffer to handle those kinds of things. But you want to make sure that you communicate why there's a buffer. I've read from the sources I used to prepare for this presentation. I read that there are cases where those outside the team might interpret a buffer or padding estimates as just the team being lazy, the engineers being lazy, or that they don't know what they're doing. And of course, going back to what kind of working environment that can create, that's trust, that's mistrust that those outside the team won't have for the developers. So it's important to just communicate. Why are we padding these estimates, or why do we have a buffer? That's just something to keep in mind. All right, next thing, we touched on estimating as a team a little bit, and I think most teams are going to estimate as a team. And this is just going to be about what are the things that you should keep in mind as you're estimating on a team. So the pros of estimating on a team are you can uncover unknowns. And it encourages communication about the estimate and communication about the story that you're estimating. And one developer might be aware of some hidden scope or some risks that the other developers weren't. So that communication that you get by estimating as a team can be really, really valuable. But some things to keep in mind about estimating as a team are, I'll touch on again, it's the engineers that should be doing the estimate. So the engineers on the team should be doing the estimate, and nobody else. So then if you estimate as a team, you're going to run into situations where people have different estimates. Somebody might estimate a 1 and another person estimates a 5. And in these situations, you want to make sure that you're communicating in a way that's not mean. You're communicating, you're communicating in a nice way. So what I mean by that is, let's say this happens where somebody estimates a 5, but the rest of the team, they all estimate a 1. You don't want to say something like, oh, come on, it won't be that hard. You're overcomplicating it. You want to be nicer than that. There's nothing wrong with asking the other person, okay, why did you estimate that as a 5? And they can explain the reasoning, and maybe there's something they're aware of that the rest of the team wasn't. But phrases like, yeah, you're just overcomplicating it, that can that can hurt the other developers' self-esteem. That's kind of shaming them based on their estimate. So you just want to be aware of how the words you use when there's a disagreement can impact the person you're talking to. Another thing to keep in mind is depending on how your team is made up, the average estimate that team makes, that might always be consistently higher or consistently lower for a particular developer. Let's say you have a team that's made up of mostly senior engineers and you have one junior on the team. Well, when the team estimates, the estimates are probably on average going to be a bit too low for that one junior developer, because all the seniors are going to think that it's easier. This is just something to keep in mind. Keep in mind, like, how's the team makeup? What's the team made up of? What are the skill sets of everybody? And then another thing to keep in mind is, and I've seen this, is over time you can kind of learn what the other developers are going to give are going to estimate. You can learn, well, this developer always estimates a little higher, this developer always estimates a little lower, or, well, the team normally gives this kind of work a 3. And you don't want to fall into the trap of where you're just subconsciously always thinking, okay, what's the team going to estimate this at? You should always consider what you would estimate it as. So if you would estimate something as a 5, but you're pretty sure that the rest of the team is going to estimate it as a 3, still estimate it as a 5. Don't just you don't just go with the rest of the team because you don't want to deal with communicating about it. All right, next section. Time, got about 15 minutes left. And yeah, we're about done. So dealing with bad estimates. Bad estimates happen. They're going to happen sometime. And this is pretty short. So when bad estimates happen, you should be open, you should be honest and transparent about it. You should communicate that you think that this estimate is wrong. You should communicate that as soon as possible. And then you should try to reset expectations, pivot, figure out, okay, well, I thought this was a 3, but maybe now it's a 5. So reset that expectation and work with, say, your product manager and the rest of the team to figure out, should you move some work around? Should you break the work up more? Should you move some things out of scope and do them later? So yeah, work with your team to reset those expectations. And I wouldn't recommend trying to crunch and finish the work in the time in the estimate that you gave it if the estimate was too low, because that's just ultimately going to lead to burnout, and it's it's not going to create a great working environment for you. So next, if estimates have all of these problems, there's pros and cons to estimating. And we talked about a lot of the things you need to keep in mind when you're estimating. Why should, if it has all of these concerns, all these things you have to keep in mind, why should we even estimate? Well, there is actually a movement online. You can search hashtag no estimates. And this is a group that says, yeah, we shouldn't even estimate. We should take the time that we spend estimating, and we should instead spend that time just delivering software. And that would be a better way of using our time. In addition, so estimates themselves can kind of influence how the project is going to go. If we underestimate how long something is going to take, how long the project is going to take, then the team might get pulled away more often to constantly rescope things because, yeah, you realize we don't have enough time to do this. We need to talk about it. We need to rescope how this is going to go. So the team might just end up getting pulled away more often because of this lower estimate. On the other side, if the project, if we estimate, if we give an estimate that's way higher than the project might actually take, well, then Parkinson's law can come into play, where the time you're given to complete a task will expand to fill that time. And this can allow for scope creep. So if you have extra time to do something, you see that you're really far ahead, then it's easy to just add new things into the scope of the project, which might be good or bad. So my opinion is that we should still estimate, though, because estimates, maybe they're not too useful to the engineers or to the developers. Maybe the engineers would be completely happy never estimating and just doing the work. But the estimates do provide value. They provide value to the business so that they can budget and so that they can plan. So that's my reason. You know, a business is going to need to budget and plan how long something is going to take, and estimates are one of our best tools to help them along with that. Okay, so that's about it. The summary, we talked about why is estimating hard, you know, different technologies, different skill levels, requirements, and so on, how each project is unique and often is not repeatable, and we're often doing something brand new. We talked about how estimates can often not be accurate. We looked at some statistics, but then we talked about how can we make better estimates? How can we do better? We talked about planning and communication around estimates, talked about estimating as a team, and then dealing with bad estimates, and then why ultimately we should still estimate our projects. All right. So we got about 10 minutes left, and I'll open this up to questions.